The preseason for 2026 is now over as we have wrapped up testing in Bahrain. And now we head in a couple of weeks' time to the very first race of the 2026 season in Melbourne. It is therefore a great time to rank each of the 11 teams in terms of who's going to leave testing as the happiest and who perhaps is going to be starting the 2026 season a little bit on the back foot. If I was to sum up Aston Martin's test in Bahrain, it would be this: 6 laps. 6 laps. That is all they did in the final 8 hours on the last day of testing in Bahrain, and that just underlines what a disaster it has been for Adrian's Aston Martin. On day 1, Lance Stroll suffered a technical issue that sent his car spinning into the gravel. And then on day 2, Fernando Alonso suffered a battery-related issue that left him stranded with no more running for the rest of the day. Before we even got going for day 3, Honda released a statement saying that due to how bad the reliability was, the team essentially had a shortage of parts, meaning that they had to limit themselves to only doing short stints with 30-minute gaps in between them. However, even that didn't happen as Lance only managed 6 installation laps before Aston Martin's abysmal preseason came to a disappointing end. This is the only team on the grid that couldn't complete a full race simulation. So, before we even talk about performance, just getting to the end of the Australian Grand Prix is going to be a major achievement, because no one else uses the Honda power unit, meaning no one else can help them test and develop their engine and even troubleshoot some of the potential problems. The beginning of the season will be essentially an outright continuation of preseason testing, with mileage being their biggest focus. They need laps simply to just gather enough data for the engineers back in Sakura, who can then start to analyze where the key weaknesses of the power unit are. And as for the drivers, they need laps simply to just start learning about the characteristics of the Honda power unit in terms of how to manage the recovery and deployment around a lap. Unfortunately for Cadillac, Week 2 in Bahrain actually brought with it even more reliability issues compared to Week 1. However, in the words of team principal Graeme Eldon, these were all small issues like sensor problems and electronical issues, and not the fundamental mechanical failures like in the case of Aston Martin. But despite all of the positivity from Checo and Valtteri, who are well aware that they are going to be starting at the back of the grid, looking at the long-run data and race simulations, Cadillac's car to start the season will probably be around 4 to 5 seconds slower compared to the front runners and around 2 seconds slower compared to the leading midfield teams, who will probably be fighting for points. On the positive side, given how solid and reliable the Ferrari power unit has been, if Cadillac are able to develop their car, which clearly lacks a lot of downforce, then there is a theoretical solid level of performance that they can access with better aero. And now, speaking about early upgrades, there is an upgrade that you can make to improve your performance. And that is the sponsor of today's video, ExpressVPN. We all know that when it comes to watching content online, very often a lot of it is geo-blocked depending on where you live, meaning that you could be paying for the exact same subscription service as someone else, but not have access to the same content. With ExpressVPN, you can quickly change your virtual location and access content that is being taken away from you. So, for example, when I was on holiday in Japan, I wanted to keep up with all of the latest content on the Sky Sports F1 channel, but because the UK has exclusive rights, most of it was blocked from me whilst I was on holiday. And no problem, however, because in seconds with ExpressVPN, I was able to change my virtual location, and then all of Sky content, including extended highlights, testing coverage, and exclusive interviews, were all available to me from anywhere in the world. Even with just a basic subscription, you can use ExpressVPN on 10 different devices. And find out how you can get up to 4 extra months by clicking the link in the description box down below. And go to expressvpn.com alders. And remember, there is also a 30-day money-back guarantee if you decide to change your mind. So once again, a big thank you to ExpressVPN. Alex Albon specifically stated that the focus for Williams this week, after doing the joint most laps on week 1 and getting a lot of mileage back after they failed to get to the Barcelona shakedown, was more performance-orientated. But the problem is that the car definitely didn't look fast at any point. Carlos Sainz actually set the team's fastest time on the softest C5 tyre, which barely any other driver used. And even then, Williams only managed to do the 9th best lap time. You can just tell that the drivers are disappointed after all of the hype and expectation about ditching 2025 and focusing entirely on 2026, and are downplaying expectations, with Sainz saying that Australia will be more challenging than they expected, and Albon also saying that we are not maybe where we wanted to be. It is well documented that Williams' car is overweight, meaning that on top of the normal aero development, at least there is a lap time which they should be able to more easily access if they just trim the car during the early parts of the season. Given that Audi is essentially still the same old Salatine, but with a brand new power unit and also new internals like their own bespoke gearbox, it's no surprise that their biggest challenge has been reliability and also drivability, with trying to integrate all of that bespoke new hardware for the very first time. Having said that, whilst reliability still remains a big question mark, the car did start to look more competitive as the test went on. Gabriel Bortel, who lost a whole morning's worth of running on day 2, put together a very solid race simulation on the final day, and overall, the team have continued to optimize how to best extract performance out of the electrical side of their power unit as well. Where I think Audi continued to struggle, however, was with their race starts. That is an area that some of the teams made big progress across from week 1 to week 2. However, with Audi, the race starts remained very inconsistent, which I think is a concern ahead of Australia. The headline for Racing Balls is that 18-year-old rookie Arvid Lindblad has already become a record breaker. On the final day, he did a mammoth 165 laps, which is the most laps anyone has ever done during a single day at Bahrain testing. The car looked more dialed in for both of the drivers compared to week 1. But track side, there is still a clear limitation when both of the drivers tried to lean on the car a little bit more to extract performance. It doesn't look like the car is giving the drivers confidence to be able to push it. And perhaps they are still not able to deal as well with the instability that is induced by having to run the car in lower gears to harvest energy. Whilst the race simulations weren't quite as good as some of the other midfield teams, for example, at the end of day 3 during a comparative race simulation, Lindblad finished 18 seconds behind Old Man. I still think that in terms of reliability, this has been an incredible test for the brand new Red Bull Ford powertrain. The Alpine undoubtedly looks to be the best Mercedes power team behind the Works team and the reigning champions McLaren. It was unmistakable how confident both Gasly and Colinto were to push the car as the focus switched a lot more to performance. Trackside reports indicated that the car was still a little bit front-limited, which is something that the team will need to develop at the start of the season to make it more sharp and responsive. But even so, and not only did the car give the drivers confidence, but they were also able to deliver lap time at will. Alpine really managed to get on top of their reliability issues that hit them hard on week 1. And that transition from being a Works Renault to a customer Mercedes so far, as we expected, it does seem to have given them an instant boost in competitiveness. Right from the very start of testing, going all the way back to Barcelona, where Ocon on the very first day of 2026 running did 154 laps by himself. Ever since then, throughout Bahrain 1 and Bahrain 2 have been relentless, metronomic, reliable, and they've always been able to produce good lap times when the drivers have tried to go for performance runs. If you combine all of the running from all 3 tests, HA has done the second most laps out of any team. Out of all of the customer teams, they know their car and their power unit better than anyone else. And even when you look at their best lap times, although Man set a lap time that was 0.66 seconds slower than Gasly, he did so on a harder compound. This week, they brought an upgrade to the car that they will start the season with. And yet again, they impressed. Both drivers executed very competitive race simulations. However, there does still seem to be a clear gap between the H-Alpine duo and the established top 4 teams. Red Bull were able to hit the ground running during the early parts of testing in Barcelona and Bahrain week 1, which in itself is a massive achievement for a brand new engine manufacturer. This week, however, as everyone has been able to refine their package, just that little bit more and get closer to their theoretical maximum. It does look like Red Bull have slipped back just a little bit. Isaac Hagel had a frustrating test as an issue on day 2 essentially wiped out an entire morning's worth of running. However, the Red Bull in the hands of Max Verstappen continued to look very strong with very comparable race simulations to that of Oscar Piastri, who was on track at the same time. It looks like the quality of deployment of its energy is where the Red Bull is able to match the Mercedes and Ferrari power unit, but over longer race runs, it isn't able to sustain that energy as well over the course of a lap. McLaren definitely feels like a team that has tried to slip under the radar. At every opportunity, they have talked up everyone else. And whilst it does seem that, to start the season, the Mercedes factory team will have a slight advantage over their customers, McLaren has still done a great job to just continue to chip away day by day. When it comes to race starts, that is definitely an area that both drivers seem to nail during their practice starts, indicating that they have been able to fine-tune that launch and power delivery from the Mercedes power unit very well. On race runs, as previously stated, McLaren and Red Bull looked very similar. But what I think is also true for both teams is that even if they start the season on the back foot, they have been by far the best teams at developing their cars over the course of the season. Looking back at McLaren in 2024 and Red Bull in 2025, there is absolutely no doubt that Mercedes were sandbagging in Bahrain and didn't reveal the ultimate speed and potential of their car. Perhaps because of the looming engine controversy vote that's coming up. The fastest time that they set done by Antonelli came on day 2 when the track conditions were not at their best. On the final day, their run plan was also a little bit odd with no outperformance runs on fresh tyres at the end of day 3. Instead, choosing to simply do stints of no more than 10 or so laps. However, that being said, all of those stints across multiple tyres were as good as anything that anyone had done before. That is not to say, however, that it's been an entirely smooth test for Mercedes. Antonelli suffered a loss of pneumatic pressure, which stopped the car and required a full engine change, which is exactly what happened during week 1 as well. But even so, Mercedes still did more laps than anyone else in Bahrain this week. And across all 3 tests combined, no other team on the grid did more laps than Mercedes during preseason testing in 2026. Although Ferrari's rotating rear wing was the thing that caught everyone's attention early on, and it remains to be seen whether that test item will remain on the car for the 2026 season. Or what I liked about Ferrari is that they didn't spend time messing about. Apart from the fact that an engine issue during the morning on day 2 really curtailed Lewis's mileage, for the most part, yet again, Charlotte was able to do multiple competitive race simulations. And across all of the 3 tests, they combined for the 3rd most mileage out of any team on the grid, only behind Mercedes and fellow Ferrari power team H. Ferrari leave Bahrain having left no stone unturned in terms of reliability and also performance. Leclerc's consecutive fastest laps at the end of day 3 showed that he clearly had the confidence to push the Ferrari lap after lap, and Ferrari didn't feel the need to sandbag as they gavel multiple sets of brand new tyres to go out and to do qualifying laps to understand where the limitations of the car are at its limits. For those that were watching, it was clear that even when made a mistake after setting a purple sector, it wasn't because the car was unstable. It was because he was genuinely pushing hard. He set the fastest time overall on the soft C4 tyre, and it must be said that even his fastest time on the C3 tyre was still faster than what anyone else was able to do. Well, there you have it. Once again, a massive thank you to ExpressVPN. Don't forget that you can get up to 4 extra months off by clicking the link in the description box down below or go to ExpressVPN.com's orders. If you did enjoy this video, then don't forget to subscribe. That would be massively appreciated, and I'll see you in the next one.